Yo, what is good YouTube? Tempo TCG here, back on the Shuffle Squad YouTube channel, and today I'm going to be doing another tier list video. The meta has changed a lot since our previous tier list on the Twilight Masquerade metagame, and I think that there's definitely some decks that deserve to be much higher than they initially were. So let's jump into this tier list, let's see what's on here, what I think is way better than it used to be, what is way worse than it used to be. Let's just jump into it right away, starting with the same two as always. We have Dialga. I think Dialga stays a pretty good deck. I think it's probably still in about the same spot it is right now, where I think it's really solid. I don't think it's like the best deck in format, but I think there's a lot worse decks. For that reason, I'm putting Dialga just in B tier right now. I think it's just one of those middle of the pack decks you can play if you know it's going to be really good against some 2-prize heavy decks. And in general, I think Dialga's a fine play. Entei Valiant, probably don't play this deck. I think it started to see a little bit of success coming out of our Temporal Forces metagame. However, now that we have entered Twilight Masquerade, it's died off a lot. Arceus Tina is another deck that kind of just died off. The Rise in Raging Bolt makes it very hard to play these 2-prize heavy decks right now. Just the fact that Raging Bolt, no matter what, is just taking a 2-prize knockout if you start a 2-prizer. It's kind of unfortunate, makes it a little bit difficult to play decks like Arceus Giratina. So for that reason, the deck's going in C tier right now. I think for NAIC, it's just probably not a great play. Great Tusk Mill. Now, this is a deck that I definitely don't think is very good right now. It might see a little bit of success, actually, just off the fact that I think Great Tusk is one of those cards that it can surprise people, especially like if you're playing against someone who doesn't have experience against Mill. I think having that Mill 4 is really strong, especially against the meta we're looking at. We're like, oh, we're looking at decks that need a lot of rare candies, or we're looking at decks like decks like Raging Bolt that like they just go through a ton of cards. I think a deck like Great Tusk might see a little bit of success. I probably wouldn't play it, but it might. Regular Future Box probably also won't see any success. I just think it's probably a bad deck. Lost Box, this is a deck I think is still really good. It does take a good Raging Bolt matchup, like nearly unlosable if you play properly. So for that reason, I think that like A tier is really solid for it. I think that like having a good Raging Bolt matchup is really important right now. Your Dragapult matchup might be a little bit scary. I don't think Dragapult is going to be actually as big as everybody thought it was going into NAIC. However, I think it's still solid enough that I probably like would try to maybe include some cards. Like maybe I'm playing Rabaska instead of Manaphy Jirachi, just so that like Dragapult can't get through my stuff right away, because like you play a lot of low HP Pokemon, so it's a little bit difficult to get through. One thing I am worried about is like if you Frenzied Gouge a Dragapult and then they boss something up and then kill the Gouge and kill your active, you're probably in a pickle, but overall I think the deck is still fine. I think relatively, I think it's still very strong. A Lost Zone deck that I don't think is very strong is Giratina right now. I think it's probably low B tier, high C tier, just off the fact that like there's a lot you can do with the deck, but I think the Lost Zone engine in general is kind of a little susceptible to Dragapult, and with Giratina specifically, I think it can definitely put you in some sticky situations if you don't pop off early enough. But I think in general, the deck is okay. Like your Charizard matchup is still fine, and Charizard is still running rampant. And in general, I think that maybe if you're playing Lost Zone Giratina, you'll be okay, but it probably wouldn't be my pick for the event. Gardevoir's probably a deck that I would pretty confidently put up a high A, or maybe S tier. Right now I'm gonna put it in that A tier. You have a very good Raging Bolt matchup. If you play properly, your Lost Box matchup is relatively fine if you start your like Flutter main. And in general, like you take good matchups into a lot of the top decks in the format. I think Dragapult might be a little bit hard, Charizard might be a little bit hard, but I think that both of those like are definitely still winnable. And I think that's kind of where you have to think about it, is like, is this bad matchup really bad, or is it like slightly unfavored? And I think Gardevoir's got a couple unfavored, but it's got some matchups that are pretty important, that are pretty heavily favored for it. So I think that's pretty important. Gardevoir Raging Bolt, don't play this, just the worst Raging Bolt. Charizard, like as much as everybody loves Charizard, like I just don't know why people are playing it, to be honest. I think it's probably actually worse than Dialga. Charizard on Limitless right now is like the 5th most popular deck, which to me makes 0 sense. Like your Dragapult matchup's really bad. Your Raging Bull matchup, if you're not playing the tech cards, is really bad. And if you are playing like a Gouging Fire, if you start it, that's really bad. In general, I just don't think Charizard's well positioned. I think like having a bad Lugia matchup is not great. I don't know how great of a matchup Blissey is. I don't think Blissey's too big though. Like, you do have your good Miraidon matchup, but in general, I just don't think the deck is all that well positioned. I think B tier is probably safe for it. Probably the same thing as Dialga, where like, it's a fine play, but I don't think you're like, yeah, I'm probably winning this event with Charizard, because I just don't think Charizard's there right now. Bibzard, this is like worse regular Charizard, so it's going in D. D doesn't mean it's a horrible deck. Just means it's worse than the other variant. Chen Pao has fallen off completely online, and I'm not too sure why. The abysmal Dragapult matchup it's pretty tough, but in general, I think your matchup spread isn't too bad. I think Chen Pao's another one of those B tier decks. I think it's probably one of the lower, probably better than Giratina for me at least. I've been liking Chen Pao a little bit in this format. Dialga's still tough, but that's just Dialga. It's probably not going to be high meta share, so you don't really have to worry about it too much. And in general, I think Chen Pao, if you've been playing it a lot, just play it. I think it's still going to be good. The decks like Chen Pao are always okay. And like, I think if the format moves towards more of a control and stall format, probably don't play it. But as of right now, I think it's a fine play for NAIC. Shox Bolt, don't play this. Ogre Bolt is so much better. Straight Roaring Moon, don't play this. It's just not good. I keep including this every single time I do this video, just because I think people are still believers in Roaring Moon, and maybe they're not playing Dodun Moon. Maybe they're playing like Dodun Sparse with Roaring Moon EX, but without Baby Roaring Moon. And I think they're like, just don't do that. I just don't think it's the right play right now. Goldango is probably C tier. It's just kind of tough right now with like so many matchups that I'm like, I don't know how good Goldango does into this. Like, there's a lot of stuff you kind of need to make work, and I don't think Goldango's a deck right now that I'm overly impressed with. I think it's fine. I think like, yeah, if you've been playing it a long time, keep playing it a little bit, but I'm not sitting here like Goldango seems really strong, because it just doesn't. Block is another deck that I think is probably A tier, right? You've got a near auto win Raging Bolt matchup, which I never thought I would be sitting here having to talk about what beats Raging Bolt and what doesn't, but here we are. Snorlax does beat Raging Bolt. And I think in general, Block is a really fine play, especially like with the new Flute. I think that card's busted, and whoever printed that was not thinking about the health of the game, because that is insane to have that. And I think in general, Block is really good. It's one of my picks for NAIC, just because I think the deck is really strong, right? And as long as you don't run into Lugia, you're probably relatively okay. Ancient Box feels like a deck that I'm really reluctant to put in B tier, but I kind of feel like it's probably better than Chen Pao. It's probably better than Giratina, but like, once again, it's got a good Raging Bolt matchup, but some of its other matchups are super sketchy, and I don't really know. I'm not the biggest fan. I've never been a big fan of Ancient Box, but I think it's still fine going into next format. Is it going to be as good as it is right now? We'll have to wait and see. I don't know how good of a matchup Dragapult is. I haven't tested it too much. I'm not assuming it's very good at all, though. Just because, like, they can just ping damage around and just wipe your board eventually, and that'd be unfortunate. But that's kind of how the game works right now, is, like, we've got to sit here and be like, well, who's gatekeeping? Who's good? Like, there's a lot to this meta right now. There's so much diversity in decks you can play. And in general, I feel like this is one of the more, like, diverse and robust metas we've ever had. Lugia, I think Lugia is the best deck in the format. I feel like when you play, which I thought Lugia was going to be less consistent, but it's turned out to be pretty solid in this format. I think Lugia is probably an S tier play. I think it's like, if I had to pick a deck that I'm like, this is best deck in format, it's probably Lugia. It has so many tools. Legacy Energy is very good. Being able to use Iron Hands, being able to make a Chinchino a 0 prize Pokemon, all that stuff is really great. Your Raging Bolt matchup's pretty okay. Like, your Charizard matchup's pretty good. I think your Dragapult matchup's really good. In general, I think Lugia is just that deck right now, and I think if Lugia isn't on your radar to play for NAIC, I think you're not testing properly, because I think Lugia is so good this format, and in general, I would not be surprised at all to see Lugia win NAIC. Aleki Donnie, probably the worst variant, so I'm putting it down in D tier. Not really going to talk about it too much. Salvatore Box Banette, probably the worst variant, so I'm going to put it down here in D tier. Torterra also deserves D tier. Last time we made Torterra its own tier, but you know what? Torterra's all right. I'll allow him to be over here at D tier with all the other homies right now. This is Banette. I'm going to call this like Gardevoir Banette, where it's not like Salvatore Box Banette. I think this is a pretty good deck. There's not too many decks that really rely on items right now, but in general, I think it's still fine. It's probably a C tier deck where like these decks are all miles ahead of these decks down here. Like C tier decks for me, I'm like, I could play one of these and not feel too horrible about it, but like D tier, I'm like, if I played one of these true regional, someone please don't allow me to go back to another regional or major ever again. And talking about C tier decks, Blissey is one of them. I want Blissey to be good so bad, but I think an abysmal Lugia matchup, a very bad Raging Bolt matchup, like both of those are kind of tough to get over. And in general, just decks that are one-shotting you is probably not ideal right now. I think if Raging Bolt does die down a little bit, let's say Guardy does really good, I think Blissey's probably a good deck. Just being able to loop everything with like Charon's Care and stuff, it feels pretty strong. So I think Blissey is all right moving forward. I wouldn't say play it right now. We'll have to wait and see what comes after NAIC. Let's say looking into Worlds, we're looking at some stuff. Maybe Blissey will be a good play for Worlds. I don't really know though. We're getting another mini set before then, but we'll have to wait and see. I was really excited for Blissey. It didn't really turn out, but that's okay. Miraidon is a deck that... Where do I want to put... Miraidon's probably high B tier, where I think Miraidon is good again. I think it's really solid again. And especially with Dragapult coming out, I think Miraidon is like... It might be very strong, but like Charizard is still here. So that's a little tough for Miraidon. I think Raging Bolt in general is like kind of a tough matchup because like if they go second and just kill you, then you just lose because you're never taking a one prize. Like you're never having a one prizer in your active. So in general, I think that Miraidon's probably pretty good, but probably not like A or S tier. I think it's kind of like you could play it. I wouldn't be surprised if it won NAIC. Miraidon's just kind of like that, where if it rolls hot, it just wins. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Speaking of decks, I think are pretty good meta calls. This is Spathra. I actually think a Spathra's like... I think a Spathra is very good coming into this meta. So like there's a couple reasons for that, and one of them is Dragapult doesn't have much energies or energy acceleration, so requiring 3 energies is really tough. Another is Raging Bolt not being able to like attack nearly as easily is pretty important. Charizard, once again, we know how good it is against Charizard. Like Miraidon needing an extra energy feels really strong. I think in general, the deck is really good going into this format, and I don't think a lot of people are talking about that. But I think like Spathra actually might be pretty solid. Your Dragapult matchup, like if you get caught in the early game and they start picking off your little 30 HP Pokemon, you're probably not having a good day. But I think like you should be fast enough where you can start competing with Dragapult relatively early. Maybe it's not as good of a matchup as I was thinking, but I don't know. To me, it kind of seems all right. For Alligator, don't play this deck. Shadow Adam, he did just get a day 2 with it, but probably don't play for Alligator or Incineroar. The Ogres, probably don't play those. Don't play Infernape Raging Bolt. Raging Bolt Teal Mask. See, as much as I'd love to put this in S tier because like I'm a Raging Bolt guy, we've known that, we've been knowing that. Join my masterclass. It's actually happening tonight. I think that like Raging Bolt is kind of, it has too many flaws to me to be an S tier deck, whereas like Lugia doesn't have all that many flaws. Like Miraidon sucks, Iron Hand sucks. We know that. We've known that about Lugia though. Like Raging Bolt, like if you're playing against single prizers, you just lose. If you're playing block, you just lose. And I think like if we look at all these other decks that are at the top, like Lugia beats Raging Bolt, Gardevoir beats Raging Bolt, like Lost Box beats Raging Bolt, Snorlax beats Raging Bolt. I think Raging Bolt just takes too many bad matchups that I just don't know why people aren't seeing that. Its usage rate online will not translate to NAIC, and its success online won't translate to NAIC unless it keeps that really high meta share, in which case it might, but I really don't think it will. Pult Zard, I think this deck is, I don't know, probably like the worst Dragapult variant. I think there's a lot of Dragapult variants. I think this one's probably the worst. I would probably put this maybe in like D tier. Maybe it's a C tier deck. I don't know. I think Pult Zard is like solid enough to play, but I probably wouldn't if I was playing anything. It's actually probably better than Blissey. It's probably better than all these decks, to be honest, but I just like Charizard's really strong, and I think that's kind of what carries it. Greninja, my beloved, he has to go in D tier. I've tried playing Greninja. I've tried to make it work so bad. I haven't been able to find any lists that actually function enough that you can win majority of your games. If you look at the stats online, it loses. It has every matchup is a losing matchup pretty much, and that's just unfortunate. Your Miraidon matchup's okay, I guess, like as long as they don't just hands you turn 1. But in general, deck's probably not great. Luxray's in the same boat. Dragapult is... Everybody wants to put Dragapult in S tier, but I don't know if I can. I think Dragapult's probably just also an A tier deck. Like, maybe it's even B tier. I don't think people have solved Dragapult enough that I can put it in S or A. Like, I think the card's busted. I think it's better than all these other B tier decks. But, like, until Dragapult is actually, like, fully, like, this is the definitive list, I just don't know how it's going to do well. Palafin D tier, don't play that. Iron Thorns, don't play that. Magcargo, don't play that. Sinistcha is probably don't play that as well. Pigeon Control, I think Pigeon Control is okay. Probably, I'm trying to think of how, like, the Pigeon Control matchup spread, like, you take a pretty rough Raging Bull matchup, and that's not a good thing to have. Like, most of these other decks that I'm like, yeah, your Raging Bull matchup is rough, or down in, like, C tier. I think blockage is the better way to play Control this weekend. Like, this new, like, Charizard Pigeon Control, this seems pretty good. But in general, like, Pidgeot Control is probably, like, C tier, or probably C or B tier. Maybe we'll put it, like, here. I think I like it more than, like, Ancient Box or C-Pow or Giratina right now. Arcgoo, don't play that. Well, yeah, don't play Arcgoo. I just don't think it's good. Lost Bolts. Actually, I've been thinking about it. I think Lost Zone Raging Bull is very good going into this format. It's got all the upsides of Raging Bull swinging a lot of damage. It takes a good Raging Bull Ogerpong matchup just because, like, you can just play the single prize game. I'm gonna put it in C tier. I think it's just a mediocre deck. But I think it's, like, actually fine. You can utilize hands, you can utilize Raikou. There's a lot of stuff you can do in this deck that just makes it really, really strong, actually. And it's definitely, like, a deck that I think not a lot of people are talking about, but I think people should be talking about it. Bolt Palkia, don't play that. Lost Goo, don't play that. Turbo Hands is probably fine. There's a lot of B tier decks right now. Like, decks that, like... Man, B tier is huge. But I just think that, like, B tier is, like... This feels fine. Like, you're okay to play this, but maybe don't. I feel like Turbo Hands is relatively good. Probably worse than Pigeon Control. I think that's a good spot for Turbo Hands. Like, I think Miraidon's pretty good. I think Turbo Hands is relatively okay. It's fine. Lost Charizard, don't play that. Archark feels... It's slow, and that's kind of the issue. Is like, if you're a slow deck and Dragapult starts picking you off, that's not good. If you get ampy very much, that's not good. You're an Arceus deck, so Raging Bull just kind of destroys you. It's probably got to go down with Arctina, unfortunately. I love this deck. It's so fun. But I just really struggle to do anything with it, and Alolan Vulpix V-Star with Goodra is in the same... Actually, that's probably a D-tier deck. Just don't play that. Moonsparce as the last deck. I think Moonsparce it's a deck. Probably worse than Ancient Box, just because of Raging Bull and Dragapult. Or, yeah, Raging Bull and Dragapult are probably tough for you. Probably a C-tier deck again. Like, there's a lot of decks in C-tier. I don't think there's anything in D-tier that probably belongs in C-tier. Like, you could maybe make an argument for Thorns as, like, a counter deck or whatever, but I think like, in general, like, there's how many decks here? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, I think, like, there's 23 decks up here. I think, like, if I were to say I'm trying to limit it to the top 20, like, Raging Bull would go down. I'd say probably Banette would go down, and then probably, like, Arctina would go down. If I were to keep, like, the ABC to, like, top 20, but I think, like, in general, these are fine. So, yeah, this is what I'm kind of looking at. This is what I've been seeing, what I've been testing. Like, I haven't played all these decks, obviously. I've only played a little bit of Palafin. I've barely touched Magcargo. But, like, I've played pretty much everything else. I actually have so much fun on Sinestcha EX. I think it's one of the most fun cards coming out of this set. But in general, I think this is a pretty good tier list. Let me know what you guys think. Are you guys excited for NAIC? Let me know down below. And I cannot wait to see some of you guys over in New Orleans. I do leave in a couple of days. I'm going for a little bit longer than maybe some other people, but I'm really excited for it. Me and all my homies are going down. And in general, I think it's going to be a really great IC. I can't wait to talk to all you guys then. I'll catch you later. See ya.
Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.